Hello and welcome to the Bluefish Astrology YouTube channel. I'm Lily Walker, and today I'm here to talk about the South Node new moon solar eclipse in Leo that's happening at about 10 o'clock in the morning on August 12th Pacific Standard Time. And so this is a really important new moon, um, not only because the nodes have moved into Leo and Aquarius, meaning that we have eclipses going on in this house of our chart, but also because of the overall transits for 2026 and the fact that Jupiter's in Leo and Mars is going to come into Leo, and the aspects being made from other signs to that to the sign of Leo in our chart that are going to be happening moving through the rest of 2026. So it's really kind of one of the more important new moons of this current year. So, I wanted to come on and talk about it a little bit for that reason, but also because I feel like in a lot of ways, some things are not being spoken to about certain transits. And so I did want to share, even though somewhat informally today. Um, just like as an FYI, I've been working quite a bit, and I have a retreat this weekend as well. So I'm like full-time scheduled up, but I did want to come on for a little bit and just talk informally about this new moon. And so, a new moon in Leo anytime is going to be dealing, of course, with Leo archetypes and characteristics. So we can just think for a second about what some of those are. So we know that Leo is a fixed fire sign. And what that means is that, it's hot and dry, and it's uh, the most potent expression of that energy that happens during the wheel of the year. It's like the most concentrated heat and dryness in the year. And as Benatti writes about, it's like Leo is the time in the wheel of the year where like an intemperate amount of heat and dryness gets inserted into kind of the mixing bowl of the environment of the year. And because it's like too much heat and dryness, right? Like it's an intemperate amount, it begins to create decomposition, or to, decompose the plants and blooms that have we've been growing this year, and things start to go to seed. And so, we notice this in the environment and around us as we're driving around. Maybe you're seeing the fields get like that light color of like pale brown, and everything's dark and crispy like a cracker, right? And the hay fields and the dust, and heat is very active and quickening, and it's enthusiastic and it's bright. I mean, think about how fire moves. It plumes and it catches and it runs fast, and it's adventurous and bold, and and takes initiative and moves, right? And instigates things, and also just is a big energy, and lots of enthusiasm and optimism, even with fire, and volatility. Um, and then also the byproduct of heat, it creates dryness. So then we see like the dirt could be in a clump, but then it starts to get dry and separate into individual particles, and then even blow away and create dust clouds and things like this. I mean, you just think of hot, dry, salty, sweaty summer, right? And that sort of energy, and that is a lot about what Leo is about. But in addition, Leo takes a lot of its keywords or significators, or the words that we use to describe Leo, from its domicile lord, which is the sun. So this is where we get like Leo ruling the heart, being about royalty and the pride of the lion, and wanting to roar with our creative heart truth and express ourselves, and put on a show, and who our character is, like our hero character, and also to receive praise, and like people throwing roses and things like that is very Leo. um, but a lot about our hero character and who we are as a queen or a king, and kind of where we are at with that, as a leader even. And so, you know, so a lot of that comes from, the characteristics of the sun. But in addition, we get things like being playful, and daylight, daylight wholesome fun is a lot about Leo, like the pool party in the middle of the day, right? Like it's with the kids jumping in the pool and we're eating hot dogs and gross nachos, and that sort of vibe is very Leo. And right now at this time in the wheel, in the year, we actually have Jupiter, the sun, Mercury, and the moon in Leo. So with that little package, we have the domicile lord, the triplicity lord, and the term ruler all in Leo with the moon. So the triplicity lord is the sun, but the other triplicity lords are Jupiter and Saturn, which are also either in Leo or making trine aspect to Leo. So, in support. And then Mercury is the term ruler. So we've got like everybody there in Leo along with the moon, which also means like not only does this new moon intention have a lot of elemental fodder for accomplishing its aims and magic, but it also means just like, that like our body, our mind, our heart, and our spirit are all in Leo right now. So we are really hot about this new moon to try to figure out how to bring more of this in. But what's interesting, because we would feel like that it should be so potent, so we should be feeling it so much, but so many people are not feeling that, right? And it's more like a search for how to bring that back, right? So we've got the south node there, of course, so we're letting go of certain things. But also more than that, it's where the other planets are in their journey and how they're aspecting Leo already that are telling a lot of this story. And so rather than feeling it like we're on the hurrah, huzzah of the like top of this mountain of feeling so much of this, it's more like a desire to feel that again. And what do we need to let go of in order to bring some more of that in, right? To be able to express our creative heart truth and this sort of thing. And to show up and shine and share our heart and radiate that himas and our heart forward and sort of experience how that shows up again. And we're feeling very much like this is hard, largely because of the opposition from Pluto. Now, I'm not going to discount Saturn's play in this, and we'll talk about that. But Saturn is in a supportive aspect by trine right now. So Saturn's like looking to the Jupiter, trying to help figure out how to bring some of this back in. And we'll get on to talking about that. But first, let's talk about Pluto and Aquarius, okay? Because there's that opposition between Pluto and Leo going on right now. And so all the planets in Leo have been in opposition to Pluto. And at the time of this new moon, Mercury and Jupiter are still kind of hovering there at the edge of this basket. And what's interesting is that Venus is making aspect to Mercury and to Uranus, like kind of bringing it in as a kite, like at that Mercury, So there's something about this kite out of the basket, right? But if only it were that easy, because we still got to do that Venus retrograde. So, so Pluto in Aquarius is a lot about the obsession and urge to connect. Pluto, Aquarius is an air sign, so it's a lot about communication and connection and ideas and sharing. But as we've talked about in previous videos, Aquarius is about the code or the new pour that happens in Losar. So it's where we're trying to connect the dots to see how the bigger picture comes together, right? And so it's a lot about interdependent connections. So there's like point A and point C, and the question is the interdependent connection of B that's between them. How do things come together to connect? And with the trine between Pluto and Uranus in Gemini, like we're so much, very much wanting to come back into conversation and communication and relationships, right? Even Venus and Libra, very much wanting to heal and restore balance and connectivity in our relationships, which have broken down since 2020, okay, since the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And along with a lot of other things in our world, one thing that is broken down is our interpersonal relationships. And we all know that, right? So So basically, in Aquarius, there's this urge and this obsession to transform the way that we connect so that we can connect again, right? Or connect better and build collectives and things like this. So, but at the same time, Pluto largely represents, like, it'll show up as a monster, right? It's because Pluto's the lord of the underworld. So he represents things that are subconscious or hidden, or like this hidden trauma that kind of guides our behaviors, but that we don't see. We can't consciously put our finger on that in order to even see it, to transform it and do something about it. It affects us subconsciously. And it's interesting that I'm going to use this example because Stephen Forrest got really roasted this week, which I am not feeling so great about, and maybe I'll talk for some reasons about it later. But one thing that I remember reading that he wrote was about Pluto and about how it's almost like you're like, the metaphor was of a ship, and that there was like a nautical north, south, east, west, the nautical direction kind of thing there that was guiding the boat, but that there's a beer can stuck right there next to the navigation device, and that nobody realizes it, but that beer can is slowly pulling them off course because of the way that it affects the magnet in the compass. That's the word I'm looking for. So Pluto is kind of like that. It's like this metal thing, like a rigid thing that we can't quite put our finger on, but that leads us askew, or leads us in a direction that's not true north. Okay. And so it's one, the urge to transform that, because it's also, as the king of the underworld or lord of the underworld, it's very volcanic, and that Empedocles in the volcano kind of situation where Empedocles jumps in, to transform the body into spirit kind of thing. So Pluto is very transformative and has volcanic power like that. So we'll see power plays and things going on with Pluto as well. But more from our perspective, it's about, like burning and transforming the dross so that it can phoenix fire to something more clear, radiant, and beautiful. And that would be our connections with other people, like how that happens, the interconnectivity and the connectivity, and how we do that. So we're needing and wanting to transform that. And but Pluto will often show up as a monster, right? And Austin Coppock said that, and I think it's brilliant. But yeah, I really like Austin Coppock. He's very imaginative and reminds me of he has like such a youthful little boy spirit in him somewhere, that a lot of things and plus is really smart. And so I really like a lot of things that he says. And that was one of the things that he said, was that, it often shows up as a monster. And I think that's so true, and if you were to think about who are the monsters of Pluto and Aquarius, well, we could very first think about, probably all of us think AI, right? Like AI is this amorphous sort of singularity that's developing this shadowy character that's in the wires, like a ghost in the wires, and the algorithm as well, right? This shadowy character that is influencing our connectivity and our ability to connect. But also the AI, because like you may notice that like hardly anyone wants to share their art or anything on social media or even YouTube or anything. Hardly anyone wants to share because they're being ripped off, right? It's like we don't want to feed the AI, and it's not working to connect us anymore because of the algorithm. And so we're not personally profiting from all the work that we do and put into our art. Somebody just rips it off and feeds the AI with it, and it no longer even belongs to us. So people aren't wanting to share their heart or art for a number of reasons. But even delving deeper than that, I would say, is and maybe, but also maybe more surface, but who knows, but like are also the arguments that we had and the polarity that we came into with Uranus and Gemini, largely, and these two camps of everything's kind of in two camps, right? And the two camps, like it's gotten to the point where it used to be like, fight me. And now it's like, oh my gosh, nobody would show that sign. Like everybody's looking at like posts on the internet, and they like, when I see something that like I would want to offer constructive feedback or an alternative position, like a polarity position, I just scroll on. I don't have time for that. Like I don't even want to engage because it's not productive. And I think we've all learned that by this point. All it does is destroy our relationships with the people that we have close to us who have some different media feed and are seeing the world differently, right? And so there's this shadowy thing in the way that we connect and share our heart truth because we don't want to fight. So we're just keeping quiet. And that is also, we don't want to rock the boat with the authorities. There are lots of different ways that Pluto and Aquarius and the spying on us and kind of tabulating who we are and our likes and whatever, and putting us into categories, and the monitoring system, the social credit scores and all of that thing. Like we're more and more hesitant to share what we think or what we're feeling. And I think that is a big symptom of Pluto in Aquarius, and that we can see that very clearly with the opposition to Leo, right? And so in this moment, as we're approaching this South Node Leo eclipse, we are all feeling into how do we let go of that, because we're unhappy and need to talk. Uranus is in Gemini, for goodness sake, right? And Mercury is in Leo now. And so everybody is needing to share, to talk it out. And so, and wanting to share and find the others. That's the other thing. If we don't share our heart truth and show up, then we can't find the people who agree with us and who we're going to create collective with, But also more mindfully, I just want to like immediately point to, again, this is a South Node eclipse and we're letting go of things, largely points of pride. And that as Mars comes into Cancer, the urge is I've already seen it with the Stephen Forrest thing. People want to share their heart truth so bad that when something comes up that they feel like, okay, I want to share on this, they follow a very well-trodden path. And they start beating the dead horse of postmodernism, which is what we're all arguing about, right? And so I'm going to get on to talking about how we need to bridge that into metamodernism and take a different approach, a different, unique approach, and so not taking that well-worn path of how we express our heart truth that expresses one side of the polarity. However, most of the world is going to be unmindful about this, including a huge heap of astrologers, apparently, and they are going to be following that well-worn path of just expressing the standard issue heart truth of an ideology. Okay, and so I would just be liking to urge anybody who might be listening to me to maybe try to think, to get out ahead in front of that. Okay. Anyway, so my point in this is just the Leo oppose Aquarius is highlighting how we have had a repressed heart truth. We've been repressing our heart truth in order to get along with the people in our worlds who we love, our family members, our work people, our community members, and people on the internet. Like we just want to have a conflict-free experience, right? Like, and it's like, forget about politics. Let's just talk about how is your mom, okay? How's your family doing? This sort of thing. What are you up to in your art? What are you studying? These sorts of things. And it got to the point where we weren't connecting on that anymore, and we've cut everybody out of our lives. And so there's this obsession to transform that. But nevertheless, the trine from Saturn to Jupiter really pumping people up on that heart truth as that balloon pumps up, to November 15th, that trine is going to be, that's why I keep warning against this balloon pumping up. That trine, if we're not mindful about it and are just beating that dead horse of the old path, it's just going to blow up and pop. Okay. And so that's not the way forward. But astrologers often aren't see, even though they see the big picture, somehow they're not seeing it. I don't know. Um, I don't know what to say about that. But just watching the Stephen Forrest thing was a bit shocking to me, that hardly anyone was able to recognize the postmodern argument in that, and to move to a metamodern position, which I would be happy to explain at another point if people are offended by what I'm saying. I'm not meaning to be offensive. I'm not, but maybe I'll get onto it because I do have a story. But at this point, let's go on and talk about Saturn in Aries, okay? So because Saturn in Aries is applying to a trine to Jupiter, and Jupiter is you know, in Leo during the time of this full moon or new moon. And so and we also will get onto the fact, we're going to get onto a lot of things. I'm sorry, I've got a lot to say. So Saturn retrograde in Aries. Okay, so Saturn, we know about the Saturn journey and what happened with Jupiter and Saturn in 2020. We know that they had their square aspects in 2024, and about how on the first one, like Jupiter really won, and we may have seen some things about how the institutions as they were, like how it was good that they fell, and how we were maybe grateful that we weren't part of those institutions, or weren't part of having to try to hold them up or figure out what to do now that they had fallen. That was one aspect of the squares. But the other aspect of those squares I really noticed because Venus was with Saturn in Pisces during the second one, at least. And like, we really that reminded us what was good about the institutions and the institutional history and things like this, because Venus was really nostalgic and appreciating Saturn in Pisces there at that time, right? So we did have reminded to us the things that we want to bring forward into the new world and what to appreciate about the old institutions and structures. But there was both sides coming up with the Jupiter square Saturn. But now we're at the point where Saturn is making trine to Jupiter, okay? So this is an aspect where we've got the baby Saturn, because Saturn lost in the conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn. And Jupiter went on and is now in Leo. He's the elder looking back to Saturn. And Saturn is a brand new baby ruler, because Saturn still has the authority. No matter what, we still need Saturn. We can't get rid of Saturn. Like, we may reset who the new emperor is, who the new king is, but we still need a king, because Saturn he's the building blocks. He's how we pull reality together. He's the material structure. You know, without the blocks to build something, we can't have a structure to protect us, or a container for the dirt to go in. The plant can't get its roots all set down and build up. It would just keep going out, and without limitations, things can expand too big and things like this. So Saturn is really a necessary principle in our environment and world. But we did let go of the old Saturn and are now in a new Saturn phase, and and that Saturn is in Aries as a brand new ruler. And we know that Saturn is in his ultimate detriment in Aries. He's in exile. It's like the worst position for Saturn to be in. And I'm sure that you guys already know why, right? Because Saturn likes to go slow and take his time. He's all about his age and authority of experience and all of these things, where, Aries is a fire sign, and you got to think on your feet, and you got to be quick with your responses. And there ain't no time for, everything's unprecedented at this moment. And so Saturn's really out of his element, right? And retrograde, he's even weaker. Okay. And then that being, in addition to those things, the position that he's going back to is alarming, if nothing else, right? Like, Saturn is going back to the point where he was on April 19th, which I heard called by an interesting source, the Iron Lockdown. But we know that April 19th, Saturn, it's creating ultimate pressure, right? Like, to get this square of stability together, and Mars, the ruler of Aries, like ruling that we need to get it together fast. Like, we're falling through. We need to build the bridge on the fly, but we need to take another step. We got to get everybody across that bridge, and the next piece isn't there. So having to build so fast, and the pressure of it all, right? And one can only imagine the financial pressure, the feeling of hopelessness and lack of like ability to get it together, like can't even see a way that it's even possible, like the hard scrabble that I talked about in the Losar video of how we feel about trying to get the steady square together. So we're still under that extreme amount of pressure. And that being said, it's also true that Mars in Cancer right now is coming up. He's come up to Cancer where he is at fall and in detriment. And he is bringing, as the ruler of Aries, he's come into Cancer to bring his fight and his cry about it home to mama, and with like, he doesn't have dignity in Cancer, but he does have dignity where Saturn is, and he's going home to cry about it. And it's, Mars in Cancer brings hurt feelings, bruised emotions. One word that's coming out to me really big around this is wounded pride. And that has to do with the Leo too. But, Mars will be making square to the Saturn, right? So the amount of pressure on us during this, it's like we're trying to figure out how to make it better. And it bringing the heating the water, stirring up the pot. And so the silt gets all going like a snow globe, right? And we can see these problems in our emotions, and it's going to be a challenging period, from the eclipse moving on through September 1st as that square comes in, right? So, the wise among us will be wanting to busy that Mars, clean the house. How do you clean emotions without throwing up on your family, right? Because I'm really in danger of that, right? Like, and I'm sure we all are, right? Like, how do I not spill my bratty emotions and like leak my bad mood onto everybody? How do I do something about that myself in my private world and have good psychic hygiene so that I'm able to care for the people around me more, right? Yeah, so I'm talking about how Saturn's retrograde and going back to the point of the iron lockdown, which is also a lot related to how we're getting gas, Aline, for the vehicles and things like that. And so he's going back to that point, but nonetheless making trine with Jupiter. So, Saturn's trying to get this square together. And as he goes retrograde, he'll go back to the bricks that we laid down from April 19th until the point he went retrograde. And then he'll go, so he's going back to kind of pick up those bricks and, kind of relay that ground down. Okay. And so as he goes direct, we'll relay those bricks down and come forward through. And I mean, it's interesting to me because 14 degrees Aries is my IC, my IC point. So if you're an astrologer, you may recognize immediately how hard these transits have been on me and what a risk to my life force that transit is, right? But I'm a soldier, okay? So I'm soldiering through today better than some days. But so Saturn retrograde in Aries is going back to that point, and there's a lot of pressure on us, and it's going to come into the emotional waters, right? And we're going to start feeling bratty about it. And so my warning was that as people start feeling that and the urge to express their heart, right, we're going to start hearing more of not the fight me as much as I'm going to say my truth and I don't want to hear another word about it. And they're not going to hear the other side, right? But just warning against that well-beaten path, like beating a dead horse as opposed to riding a fire horse. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. I need to say that Saturn in Aries, the only element he has to build with is fire. So Saturn is building with fire. And that is why, outside of all the external influences going on and the way the propaganda machine is filtering into our experience and the way we're relating with others, the only element Saturn has to build with is fire, and Jupiter and Leo is trine. So we need to get outside of that and recognize that what Jupiter and Leo is trying to do is have us believe in ourselves and our optimism and our ability to build into the new world and the new earth eventually with, because fire is the highest element, right? It goes earth, water, air, fire, air, water, earth. So the elements come down from God into fire. And that's all we've got right now to go on is a wing and a prayer, right? But we have to believe in that wing and in that prayer. Otherwise, we're sunk ship, right? So it's like for those of us among us who can hear with eyes to ear, see and ears to hear, we have to be leaders and way showers of optimism and have fire, and build with fire when we can't see it yet in reality, right? Because it's not there tangibly yet. So we have to so Jupiter in Leo is working to have us believe in ourselves again. So that's why I say with the South Node in Leo, it's about letting go of things that block our self-confidence or our ability to have that fire of pride in ourself and our work and the good things about us, like the bodhicitta things about us, but it's also huge not to guard against hubris and not go into it thinking we're uno activists blowing up as that balloon at the Saturn, trying to Jupiter and Mars comes in and it gets so hot and it pumps up that air balloon going up, 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 unmindfully, people going, sharing their heart truth, not wanting to hear the other side. And then that balloon pops. And so, and the Venus retrograde and all of this. So, so I'm just really wanting to try to help the people who may be listening to me have some sort of foresight around this process and be thinking about things that get in the way of them being able to be a light bringer and to bring the light in a genuine, authentic way. And another thing that's really interesting about this Jupiter is that the next full moon, that's, the fruition, 6 month, 2-week fruition of this fortnight fruition of this new moon, which is important as well as the 6-month, right, is a North Node lunar eclipse on Fomalhaut. Okay, so Fomalhaut is the watcher of the South, and he only supports things where the Jupiter is completely pure. Like your intentions and the light you're bringing has to be righteously pure. It cannot be self-focused. It cannot be diluted. It cannot be covered in dirt or whatever, and materialism and ambition and aims and spiritual materialism kind of things. No, it has to be extremely, extremely pure. And so I'm going to get on to talking about 2 esoteric stories, and I'm kind of dying to get there. But let's talk first about how this node is on the 29 degrees Regulus. Okay, so the South Node is at 29 degrees. The North Node is at 29 degrees Aquarius, which happens to be conjunct my Mercury, right? And so so I may or may not be able to speak to this somewhat well. Everybody gets their turn, and I kind of feel like at this moment also Venus is conjunct my Jupiter by primary direction today, so there's something to that too in Aries. And so but this Regulus is the sign of the king, right? Like at 29 degrees Leo, this is the royal star, but it's a South Node eclipse, right? So it's the king is dead, long live the king. So with this eclipse, we are ushering out the king who was the Saturn ruler of the old world. And that Jupiter's right there ready to come in, the new guard king. Okay. And so with this eclipse, we're letting go of sort of that way I see it is like that hero character of how we defined ourselves in the past before 2020, all of those traumas, all of those stories, all those experiences that we've had that are so formative in our character. How do we let go of that and step into the present tense and move from this point forward, and let the new child king, the Aquarian child king, sit on that throne of our heart that's got just sort of that beginner's mindset. And this is a very meta modern position, okay, to be in there. So But so at this time, the king is dead, long live the king. And another thing to note is that Regulus has now moved and is in Virgo, early degrees in Virgo. So this is very much letting go of that position of the old king and bringing in the new. And Leo's a masculine sign, Virgo is a feminine sign. And so it is more about a matriarchy, although I don't agree with, the current propagandas of elevating one gender over the other, or saying, or many things about gender potentially. But all I'm saying is that it's a feminine archetype, and long live the queen, you know. And so I look forward to us kind of more dovetailing into that more significantly as Regulus moves on. It takes a really long time, though, for fixed stars to move so long we hardly even notice in our lifetime. And so, but yeah, so the South Node there in Leo. Let's see. I talked about Mars and Cancer. Yeah, so I think now maybe Venus in Libra is maybe something I want to talk about a little more significantly, because Venus in Libra is beautiful. She's in domicile, but unfortunately, she is aspected really hard. I mean, they're nice aspects, but any aspect with Uranus is unstabling. It's kind of like an unstable energy. And so Venus is trying that Uranus. And Gemini, just so much asking us to let go of points of pride and come into beginner's mind so that we can remake like friendships with people that are like childlike, right? Like, we're just playing. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't matter these things. We're kids. We're playing. We're learning together, and this sort of thing. So, I think that Venus, that would be so helpful to us, the more that we could do that. But unfortunately, things are also important. Things that happen in the outside world are also important. There's a relative and absolute truth, and I'm not trying to deny that. All I'm saying is, for health of our spirit and our relationships with people in our worlds, like, the more that we can lean into beginner's mind and being like a kid on the schoolyard, on the play yard. Although kids fight a lot too, right? But the more that would help our relationships. And Venus in Libra is very much wanting restorative justice in relationships. The Libra axis of our chart very much fell apart in 2023. Israel-Palestine happened then. And other things, and then Uranus was in Taurus, really rocking Venus's house there, and shaking things up. And so that we really are looking for some restorative justice in our world. I think a lot of us feel like it's almost that justice is such an elusive bird right now, and that we would really like to see her be able to show up again, and have some footing. But largely that, and so there's some work will be done with that as Venus goes retrograde in Scorpio, really honing in on what we desire and what we want to magnetize. Like, our desire magnetizes things towards us. It's like that burning desire is like a wah, wah, that pulls things to us. And so the things that we desire to both survive and thrive, like things we desire in a very deep way, in the marrow of our bones. So Venus retrograde is going to be in Scorpio, is going to be looking at that, and also just the beauty of scars and trauma, and how that makes us distinct and unique, and how it's actually that a deepening experience, and how it's very rich, even if raw and bloody, and this sort of thing, and sort of the value of relativity that comes through trauma. Things like that will be coming. But ultimately, she comes back into Libra and then goes forward again. So it's, we really are trying to weigh the way that we're raw and bloody and traumatized with how do we clean that up and create some sort of beautiful art of living and of our life and the relationships that we're in. Okay, so I want to tell a couple stories, esoteric stories about Leo, because I think that this really starts to get to it. Okay, so one of them is from Alice Bailey, and you can read The Labors of Hercules. And the story of this moon is the story of the Nemean lion. So Hercules, the solar hero in training, goes and he battles the Nemean lion, and what this is supposed to represent is battling his pride. And Alice Bailey teaches that as we become individuated solar heroes, and we get better and better at that, as our cup of tea becomes more and more stout with the solar rays of Apollo, and we're really getting it and raying forward our unique heart and what we came to bring, that we start to get more loud and bright and all of this, and just like Leo, it starts to be a bit too much, right? Like the sunlight is over potent. And although she doesn't say that at all, but what she says is that at that point, we reach the point of where we sacrifice the lower self of personality, which is that stout cup of tea, to something larger. And it's almost like where the drop of the ocean goes back, where the drop goes back into the ocean, right? Like sacrificing the smaller self of personality to the larger solar archetype. And she describes it as the lower self being hung on a cross, which reminds me a lot of the tarot card of the Hanged Man. And that reminds me of Odin hanging himself from the tree upside down in order to gain wisdom. And he also had to cut out an eye. And so just the wisdom that the lunar shift of the blue shift, and the point where in Leo we move on to Libra, where we cross the gates, into the underworld, and then in Scorpio we battle the Hydra or the dragon, right? And there's that battling our fears, and being successful at that, we go through Sagittarius through the smaller gate, and there's those glimmers of hope and meaning that we begin to make of the larger sense of meaning of our experiences. And then at Capricorn, we take the initiation, and that is where we become initiated as a world server. So the difference between that, between just like a lower personality and a world server, would be like a rock star versus like a world server. Like the rock star is a reified personality that's like a crystal that needs to be crushed, right? Like it's all it's too defined, it's too material and reified. It's a costume, the rock star. And so that kind of needs to be crushed in order to move to something larger. And so and so that's kind of what she's talking about there, hanging the lower self on the cross. And that at that phase of the year, upside down, from actually from moving from Cancer to Leo to Libra to Scorpio to Sagittarius to Capricorn, where we start to go back up, right, is kind of taking the view from the side of suffering and from death and from the underworld of what life is all about and what's important, right? And so so that's the story of the Neiman lion, and you could read about that. But in that, we very clearly see the Leo Aquarius axis, right? And so, but the second story, and the one I like even better, is the story of Parsifal and the Fisher King. And you could read that story as well, and I encourage you to do that, because I'm not going to tell the whole thing. But what I will tell about it is that Parsifal was a knight, and he was raised in the woods, like completely remote and removed from society by his mother. And before he can remember, right? And so it's all the way to age 17. And so he knows nothing of the world and the ways of men, nothing. But he knows a whole lot about life and the ways of men and the ways of spirit and things like this, from interacting with the animals and his mother, and he does have some people around, and interacting and doing his chores and being in nature and sort of all these things. Like, I mean, he had a very rich experience. It's just they keep calling him a fool because, one, he's dressed like one because he has no nice clothes, but two, because he just knows nothing. The knights come riding in and he thinks they're God because he's never seen anything so fantastic before. And so he can't help himself and his destiny. So he rides off to go become a knight, much to his mother's chagrin. It actually breaks his mother's heart so much that it kills her, because the truth of the matter is that his father was a knight and died in battle, and that she had removed him because she thought that the fight really wasn't as noble or worth it, and so she took the child away from that battle that was more about material quests, spiritual materialism, maybe even, items. And so it breaks her heart that the child goes back. But, of course, I want to say Perseus right now, but it's Parsifal. Of course, Parsifal is successful because it's his destiny, and his father was like this great knight. So he goes to King Arthur's court, and he ends up winning the armor of the Red Knight, goes on to train. And then after he receives all of this wonderful training, like starts to go out on a quest. And here's where we get to the story. Okay, I just need you to know who this character is and about his personality and his character in his life. So as he steps into this story and he's on the path, and he sees a king on a boat, and it's the Fisher King. And it's quite a display, like something to definitely look at. And the king invites him to go up to his house to take a night's rest. And he's like, go on up there, I'll be up there. And he had noticed that the king kind of looked like he was holding his side or something. Maybe he looked a little pale, but he didn't ask anything about it at that point. And he goes up to the castle, and he notices that everybody's very graven faced and serious and somber, and that it's a beautiful castle, but it's not merry. And he's sitting ready for a feast, and he's kind of thinking about this, and he wonders to himself if he should ask why. But he remembers in his training from the knights that knights are not like inquisitory, and they're not curious, and they don't ask questions like that. And so he thinks that that's the rule of men, that we don't ask questions like that. And so he doesn't. He's polite. He thinks he's being polite, and he doesn't ask. And so the king comes in, and he's very pale and gaunt, and maybe nursing something that hurts. But Parsifal doesn't, and he doesn't ask. And so then they bring through the spear. And this is a spear that pierced Jesus's side on the cross after he had died. And the Roman soldiers like shove it into his side to prove that he was a human. And the blood and the water run out. Okay. And so first they bring through the spear, and it's still dripping with blood and water. And then they bring through the grail, and it is radiant. And, like your eye can't take your eyes off it. It's so gorgeous, and it's so calming, and so wonderful to look at, and magical. And as it comes by, all the bowls of food fill up, and a feast of exactly what every person wanted, even Parsifal's. And he also wants to ask about this, but he again doesn't. And so they have the feast. He receives a gift, and he goes to bed. And when he wakes up the next morning, it's like a ghost town. He's thinking people are going to come, help him put on his armor, this kind of thing, like normal. No, nobody's around. And he manages to get himself dressed and out the door and on his horse, and he's exiting the gate when all of a sudden people start saying things like throwing tomatoes and being like, I can't believe you didn't ask the question. Oh, God, so can't believe that he didn't. So disappointed in him. And at this point, he's like, oh my gosh, what? And he just leaves like not knowing, but his aunt apparently explains it to him. But the knight had to ask of his own volition because what had happened is the Fisher King is actually his uncle, and his uncle got cursed by a witch who said, you're going to be wounded like this and hurting until the Knight of the Grail comes and asks you what is wrong and how he could help you with like of his own volition and out of his own sense of compassion. And I think the point of the story is that any knight trained by normal ways wouldn't do that, because that's not the rules. But that the hope was that this knight, who had been raised in such an uncommon way with the beauty of spiritual wisdom and youth and the fundamental time period, would blend his two streams of knowledge in that moment, and recognize that, by blending, that he should ask, right? It's only right. The human suffers. Jesus, the human, suffers, and we are to ask what is wrong. How can I help? And that's the point of becoming a world server too, right? So, in this way, and it's an esoteric story that's all actually about this time period of the age of Aquarius, where we've gone through rationality through the epochs and learned how to think from an objective, rational position, which was part of our training as souls. We've gotten to the point where we are really good at that. And what we are asked to do is turn back around and look back and reintegrate the spirit, and come back into this more animate sense of the world where we know that God is all around us and ask how we can help with our magic and this sort of thing. And it's like the new Isis myth where the hero turns around and lifts the veil of Isis and this sort of thing. It's turning back to our intuition and our imagination, our intuitive self, after we have gone to cold, hard rationality of materialism, right? And so many people are going to beat that dead horse of modernism and postmodernism and just keep going. But the meta modern is the child who's turned around, you know. So we take what wisdom we can from our ancestors and the things that worked, and we don't we don't disparage them for the things they didn't get right, and the things that institutions, as they become institutions, they inevitably become corrupt. Anything we nail down inevitably becomes an idol, so these sorts of things. So it's almost impossible not for that not to happen, right? So of course our ancestors went wrong in many different ways, and postmodernism revealed that as truth. So we have to be our own, and postmodernism revealed that we have to be our own authority, right? We can't depend, that's why we can't depend on those elders or other people and their wisdom. We have to develop that wisdom for ourselves by taking their example, though. you know we don't just discard them from the whole thing. We try to come in and do it again in our way, and hopefully in the process of each of us doing that in our ancestral lineage, we do it better than our ancestors, because we did hear your arguments of postmodernism. Anyway, guys, I'm sure this could be better. I'm sure it could have been shorter. I'm super sorry. I hope it was at least a little bit interesting. And also just wanted to say that I am definitely going to be doing Bluefish again. So I'm going to get the website back up. I'm going to start making videos again. I really want to do a newsletter. And so because I just feel like that would be really fun. And that's something that social media is not stealing everything you do, right? So if I just send out a newsletter, and I have quite a few of you on my subscriber list, and I'm sure a lot of people will unsubscribe, but then I can build it back up or whatever. So I'm really wanting to do Bluefish again, and because I miss it. It's like I don't have anyone to talk to about my deepest feelings and thoughts and things that I see that are happening, and I don't have any way to share without the Bluefish, right? And so I want to do that, and I've got like urges to read people's charts too. Like I keep finding myself saying, I wonder what's going on in their chart. Ooh, I would like to read their chart. So I'm feeling the urge to read natal charts, and I'm also taking a class at Kepler this semester in order to try to help me. I was in a real funk and needing to relate with people, and so that was a blessing that I got. And so I'm taking that class at Kepler with Oner Doser, who is a friend and colleague of Benjamin Dykes, and it's on medieval astrology, in order to just stoke my enthusiasm about astrology again and get some joy coming in my life again. And so I'm really enjoying that class, and I'm learning a lot, and it's obviously improves my practice, and so that's really good. So if anyone wants a natal chart reading, now would be a good time, because you'll probably get the least, I'm free, and I have time and space to do it, and I'm into doing it right now. So, and I want to do them more spa day style, unless somebody wants like report style, like here's my TED talk on your chart. I really want to do more spa style, because I think that I want to talk to people and charge maybe a little less, but I want to still do the same amount of work or similar to know your chart before we sit down. But then I really kind of want to just talk about what's coming up for you and how are we seeing that in this planets? How's it in your natal chart? But how is it on this year? What's your solar return? Where are the planets? And how can we help you guide that fire horse into the sunset or whatever, as opposed to beating a dead horse, and kind of use the transits positively. So in the end, I would just like to encourage everybody to try to start leaning into expressing their heart truth again, and leaning into self-confidence, and you know, having pride in ourselves and our work, and but also letting go of points of pride where maybe we feel like we would love to reconnect with an old friend of ours, but we've gotten an argument, and we're still right, so we have these points of pride or this or that. Yeah, probably better. Yeah, you know, I would just encourage people to let go of points of pride in service of relationship and community, to guard against the Mars and Cancer and brattiness and wounded pride, and you know, just let it go, you know, let things go, and to guard against yeah, just the things I said about that rising balloon. You know, let's do this mindfully. Let go of things that are blocking our ability to shine. Let go of ways that we hold ourselves back from harsh self-criticism, our own harsh self-criticism and judgments and things like that. Let's, you know, come into the present tense, but then also have hope, and because we need the fire, the building blocks of fire in order to build out, you know. So we're going back to April 19th, and we'll move forward, you know, and what we need to be doing is looking for building blocks of fire, okay, in that process. And also just to say, whereas the iron lockdown I saw April 19th was called the iron lockdown, that same source called the August 12th eclipse the consumption of the old world. And it's somewhat ominous, and I will say it was a bit religious right leaning, and Trumpish leaning. So I just sometimes wonder, you know, I believe Paula Kane is an astrologer. I believe she is. I believe she is. I personally like Paula Kane, but maybe not everything. But there's some things I really like about her. But you know, I don't really know. And again, I'm a meta modern. I'm not on anybody's side, because I don't think any of the elite aristocracy is looking. Everybody is self-centered and looking to build for themselves. I don't really know. You know, I just know I don't want to fight or argue, and I really just want to restore my relationships with my people. And it really doesn't, you know, that's really the most important thing, is the health and vitality of my brothers and sisters and family and the world, and building up connectivity and those relationships. So anyway, I love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks for listening. Hit me up if you want a reading. I would love that. You know, I'd like to get people in the room that are on the same page, so that we can kind of talk about some of the things that we're seeing in the world, and how we are kind of charged with being light bringers. And so that we have more of a, you know, we have others, we have peers, and that will shore us up for being able to be brave enough to bring the light. Okay, I love you guys. Bye.